Alright guys, what's going on? It's your boy Eisen back with another Dragon Ball Legends discussion. And today we're going to be talking about the newly upgraded Ultra Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku, who got a massive buff from the new Platinum equipment. We're going to be discussing his optimal equipments as well as his optimal Zenkai Buffs and optimal teams. But before all of that, we're going to do a quick refresher of his kit and everything that he does provide, including the buff from his Platinum equipment. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on the upgraded beast that is the Kaioken in the comment section below. And make sure that you like the video if you enjoyed it, and consider hitting that subscribe button for the content to come. With that being said, grab your Senzu Beans and let's get right into the divination of Ultra Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku.
What a waste of time! This feels special. Fusion! Ha! I am neither Goku nor Vegeta. I'm the guy who's going to stop you!
Let's begin by taking a look at his basic information. To start, we are going to take a look at his stats, and his stats are pretty outdated for how old he is, obviously, but they aren't horrible. The main thing to be concerned about with his stats is that he has a very low amount of offensive stats. 275 strike attack, 278 blast attack with arch boost is just not very good to have. It's a very lower end of the offensive stat ratio that we see. Same thing for his defensive stats, they're much more on the lower end. You're now looking at units that are averaging in the 190s. He's still barely in the 180s for his blast defense. So that's something that is to be concerned about for his stats. Then taking a look at what cards he holds, Strike and Blast card is very good to hold for him, so that way he's a little flexible on which team he can go on. Since his stats are relatively balanced, you're looking at 275, 278, the gap is not that big there. And the Strike and Blast allows him to work on both Strike and Blast teams. With that being said, his character tags are Saiyan, God Key, Universe Rep, Sun Family, Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan, and Fourth. Two of those tags are pretty much dead, which is the Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan and Fourth. The other four tags you can make teams that work for, but in terms of the current meta, you're really only going to be looking at both Saiyan, Sun Family, and God Key. Other than that, you're going to be leadering him on certain teams. Diving over to his arts cards, he has a special strike card that gives him 5 Ki every time he activates it, which is pretty useful considering that he wants to do long combos, and it's basically a -5 to his strike arts cost. It's very nice. However, he has no blast armor on his strike cards, which is something, but that is to counteract the fact that he has so much time stop and vanish restore, and giving him blast armor would have just given him too much staying power at the time, which is why he doesn't have that still. Then taking a look over at his blast card, he has the ability to destroy all of your enemy special arts cards on hit with his blast card, which is especially good in the current meta because we do see a lot of very good green cards in the current meta. So that is where that value usually is going to be coming in. However, he does not share any anti-blast armor or key reduction on these blast cards here. Moving on to his blue card, pretty standard blue card, massive impact damage, 30% to the damage on hit, and reduces enemy ki by 70. That last part is not as useful in the current meta because a lot of people do have very high ki recovery and will just get that ki back super fast. But it's not entirely useless. You could definitely get some situations where that can be valuable, but just very rare. Diving over to his green card, his bread and butter. Every time he pops his green card, he gets 40 ki, a random card, 30% to his damage inflicted for 10 counts, and 10% permanent damage inflicted, stacking up to 5 times. Unfortunately, that damage inflicted is not uncancelable, so you do have to be wary of that if you're fighting somebody like Ultimate Gohan, who can cancel buff effects, or Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, who cancels buff effects whenever you pop his gauge. You have to be very careful of that because this will end up making you lose a good portion of your damage that you build up. Then his ultimate, which is essentially a nuclear bomb when you have it completely maxed out, deals supreme impact damage, causing and falling effects on activation, 50% to his ultimate damage, which totals to 100% if you have his max green card buff active as well, nullifies enemy endurance, and nullifies blast arts when charging forward. That is a little different than the other one, which is blast armor. So this guy will just be able to go straight through it. So if somebody tries to use a break card, if there's still anybody using Super Saiyan Gohan, then you can just completely nullify their break card and not have to deal with that. Then he's getting the extra 13,000 to hit all of his stats from the Arts Boost system. And with that being said, we're going to dive over to the abilities. For his main ability, we are looking at that he draws a Ultimate Arts card, restores his health by 30%, gets 40 ki, and gets 30 counts of Cardinal Liquefaction, which is very good because it allows him to combo for a very extensive amount of time. Cancels own attribute downgrades and normal conditions as well, which can have some niche uses, such as if you're trying to cancel the Paralyze from Rage Shenron, or if somebody's running Hero Hercule like a Menace, you can use that to cancel those abilities. Then looking at his Ultra ability, this is unfortunately reliant on having a USS team, which hurts a lot because the USS team is not currently very good, and all of his teams don't really have any USS units, so if you want to get his Ultra ability, you're pretty much forced to leader slot him. His Z ability is another hindrance to him. He gets 5% of special move damage inflicted for USS, which is pretty nice. However, he has a double defense Z ability, which is less than ideal for a lot of situations. You almost never want a double defense Z ability. Defensive stats in general in the game are not very good, and having a Z ability that gives double defense really messes up your offensive stats and causes your units to do significantly less damage. Pairing that with the fact that he already has low offensive stats, it really hurts his offensive performance. But the idea is you're still able to do long combos with him, and that's where his damage kind of neutralizes out. He doesn't do like explosion damage, but he'll do good damage over time. His first unique ability is giving him 110% damage inflicted, 50% cut, and 50% ki recovery. While he's on the battlefield, he rapidly charges his unique gauge according to ki charge time, similar to the original LF Perfect Cell. He is going to be able to take benefit if you're able to do strike ki charge as well as blast ki charges, and those will help him get his gauge a lot faster. Every time that his gauge is full, he draws a green card, restores his own health by 15% 7 times, gets 40% to the next strike arts damage inflicted up to 80%, and gets 40% to the next blast arts damage inflicted up to 80%. And then he also is building up 20% to the next special move damage inflicted up to 40%. He essentially wants to pop a special move after popping his gauge twice, and if you can, you want to try to use his strike card charging to build up his blast card damage, and vice versa to get that maximum bonus. He is also going to be getting an additional 20% to the next damage sustained cut, available right there when he fills up his gauge. And then obviously the main thing that makes him the rat that he is, restoring his vanish gauge by 100% 5 times. It does feel significantly less now that he has the initial boost to his gauge recovery, and that helps him out getting to this gauge very fast and burning through these vanishes very quickly early into the match if you're not careful. Then moving on, we are looking at his final unique ability. Whenever he comes into the battlefield, he gets an additional card draw speed level for 15 counts, restores ki by 30, and inflicts enemy with the attribute downgrade of -1 card draw speed for 10 timer counts. He also seals the enemy's strike cards for 2 counts, and whenever he vanishes, he also gets additional card draw speed, randomly destroys an enemy card, and hits them with -50% ki recovery, and he has a strike cover change to finish off. That is going to be the breakdown of his basic abilities. With that, let's go ahead and get into his optimal equipments. Taking a look at his optimal equipments, the first one to consider is obviously the new plat that he got. Even if you do not have the guy 7 stars, this is a must-run equipment on him always. It's giving him 20% health, 50% to all of his basic stats, and 50% ki recovery, all very much so needed stats for him. As we went over earlier, his basic offensive stats and basic defensive stats are very outdated, so getting this massive bonus of them helps him out a ton. His second unique on his platinum equipment that is very useful is whenever he goes under 50% health, he will restore his own health by 40%, get type neutral for 30 counts, and seal all enemy main abilities for 10 counts. This is an absolutely insanely useful ability, and the fact that you get it twice is honestly quite ludicrous, but he does have it and you can take advantage of that. Just be careful not to overuse it and waste both of the heals very close to each other, because then you're not going to be getting as much value out of that 30 count cover null and that 10 counts of sealing on main ability. So usually if you pop his half health once, you want to kind of switch him out and bring him back in later so you can get that value again. Looking at his third slot here, applies the following effects itself when the character enters battlefield, and another ludicrous ability. He gets 30 counts of cover null for free twice when he comes into the battlefield. That totals out to a total of 90 counts of permanent cover null. That is just absolutely ridiculous. As well as giving him a 50% to his unique gauge charge rate, which we talked about a little bit when we talked about his unique gauge. It makes it to where he gets his unique gauge very quickly and very rapidly. and he can very quickly just burn through that stacking and that ultimate damage and keep getting those green cards. Time stops, vanish restore, it all just flows very well. Now, if you do manage to get him to the 7 stars, which essentially means that you either pull 2 copies of him, or you ended up getting a 1 copy and then using Ultra Z power to get him to 7 stars, you will get access to these additional benefits, which is 70% damage inflicted, which is an absolutely insane amount to be getting. And then every time he lands a Strike or Blast card, when he comes in, he will draw 2 more cards if he has 3 or less, which basically gives him a full hand most of the time. And he'll also inflict a 2 count sub count increase, and depending on the unit that you do that to, you could use that to just rush someone. One example would be if you do that to Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta, whether it's in base or post. If you use that on him and he doesn't have any units on his team that lower their sub count, usually on fusions, Ultra Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta and Super Vegeta lower sub count when you attack them, but not when somebody else gets attacked. So if you were to rush Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta, regardless of whether he's pre or post, he will not be able to lower his sub count, and that's a free snipe for you. That's one of the ways you can utilize that sub count lock-in. Another unit could be if you're fighting Kid Buu. Kid Buu doesn't lower his own sub count, so if you already got rid of his endurance, you can get value of it with that, but that's a much nicher example because you'd have to get rid of his endurance first. The second equipment that we're going to be taking a look at is this original kind of LF Platinum that he got a while back. This one was equip conditions for Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, and USS, which there's basically only 2 units that fit that criteria. It's this guy and Evolution Vegeta. This equipment is giving him 10% health restore, 25% to both of his base offenses, 25% more key recovery, which puts him at 125% key recovery. And then on top of that, it's also giving him 20% damage inflicted because he is a yellow character. This is also a very phenomenal equipment to run on him, just all generally good things that he can use. The only argument over this equip is if you want to run like a double pure setup. I'm not necessarily sure how that would play out, but if you guys are curious, you guys can hop into our Discord description in the description below, and we can go ahead and test that out over there. But as far as I'm aware, it is better to run this equip than running another pure. Moving on to his final equip slot, this is going to be where you're going to be putting a pure equipment. This is his best pure for damage. So if you want to just go straight raw damage output, you want to use this pure, and this pure is also very flexible. This makes him to where he's able to use 3 equips that are all self-sufficient. He doesn't have to be, he can run on any team. He doesn't need specific teammates for these equips to work. However, one thing that a lot of people do ask a question about is the slot 3 is, do you need to have a ranged type battle member for this to activate? The answer to that is no, unless the character you're running it on is not ranged. If the character you're running on, in this case Kaioken, who is a ranged type, he will fulfill the condition for that battle style ranged. And if he was, let's say, melee, then you would need to have a ranged type battle member. Same concept would apply to his other pure option, which is going to be this Shenron equip right here. If you are running a full range type team, this pure is very good, pretty much comparable on damage to the other pure. However, it does give you 10% HP, which can be very useful. So if you prefer the HP over just the stats, I would go with this pure over the other one. That's pretty much all of his optimal equipments. There is no other equipments to really consider. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get into his Zenkai buffers. Taking a look at his Zenkai buffers now, these are all the characters on his categories that provide a buff to the yellow characters on their respective categories. Out of these units, the only ones who Zenkai buff him is the LF Bardock that is on the top left right there. Then 2 slots over, the LF Super Saiyan 4 Goku. Then another slot over for the LF Kaioken Goku. And also the God Vegeta right there under the Evolution Vegeta. And the Super Saiyan Vegeta on the bottom left right there as well is also another Zenkai buffer that you can run for him. However, out of these units, the only optimal ones really are just this Bardock right here, as he has a Blast Attack Z ability as well. The rest of his Zenkai buffers all have varying Strike Z abilities. The only other one that does have a Blast Z ability would be this Super Vegeta right here. However, with this Super Vegeta, the issue being is that his Z ability is for Super Saiyans and not Saiyans. So if you're going to be running this guy, you would need to put Kaioken on leader and then also have a Super Saiyan team, which is very hard to make. The other thing to consider is just that that guy's Z ability is outdated. It's a 25% compared to Bardock, who is giving you a full 35. So if you are going to be Zenkai buffing him, ideally you're using the Bardock Z ability. But if you are not and the other options are all that you have, that is still absolutely fine to do. He's just going to be a little bit more strike heavy than he is blast heavy. That's not too big of an issue. The other thing I would suggest that you guys consider is that you don't necessarily need a Zenkai buff for him to perform well because of all the stats that he does get from his equipment. Taking a look into the team section here, for his best setups that you can be running, the very first one that you should absolutely consider is the Majin Buu Saga's team, where you leader slot him, you run him with Ultimate Gohan, and then you can run either Kid Buu or Super Vegito. Ideally, you're running Kid Buu so that way you have a triple range setup. And you would want to run this setup, and then depending on which units you have available, these are the top 3 absolute must runs that you do have to run on this setup. You would want to run a Pui Pui for the HP, and then afterwards you'd want to run Mr. Tien here, who gives a massive amount of blast attack to the team. And to finish it off, you can choose to you can choose whichever Z ability you want last, whether it's a blast attack Z ability or something else. Ideally, you just want to run the Blue Boys there because the Blue Boys do give you a blast attack Z ability as well as a couple other useful stats, that being the strike defense and the strike attack. That would be the ideal Majin Buu Saga team, which is probably the currently best team that he slots on. Other than that setup, the other thing you can do is you can run him with Blue Beerus, who recently released. That guy is going to be right around here somewhere. Let me just take the filter off. There is the Blue Beerus, and then you can slot in Mr. Omega Shenron right there. This is the team that we used to showcase him. If you guys want to see the setup for this team, you guys can go ahead and check out that showcase video. This setup is also very nice. Beerus provides some support. However, the only thing is that you have to be very careful with your offensive stat lineup, as both Beerus and Kaioken are double defense Z abilities. This is probably his second best setup right now, and that is just something to consider. The other option is if you wanted to run LF Super 17, you could slot him in instead of Beerus, and now you have this yellow, green, red setup that's also very nice. The only thing with this setup is that 17 is starting to show a little age, and Omega is also not the greatest, but he is good rush control. And Kaioken could struggle to shine on this setup, but I think it can work pretty well if you guys were to explore it. Other than these 3 teams, you don't really have many options for him, and that's one of his liabilities right now, is he doesn't have a lot of team options. The good old classic that you can choose to do is just go for the Universal Survival Saga team. And on this setup, you're going to be running him with Mr. MVP 17, because MVP 17 provides a lot of good buffs and support, as well as just some rush control at least. And you can choose to go with a Revival if you wanted to go with Revival Goku. Or if you want to bring back Go Frieza, you could try to do that. But as you guys can see, the setup starts getting significantly worse when you start heading over to the USS team, because a lot of these units have not been updated in a very long time. That is pretty much all of his optimal teams. If you guys don't have any of those units, I would highly suggest that you don't put CC into this unit and try to make him work, because it's going to be very hard for you to do that, to have fun with him. But if you guys are just a Kaioken fan, at the end of the day, depending on your rank, you can just make him work in any of the ranks with any team that you want. Those are pretty much all the factors to consider before we consider where we want to put Kaioken in the current meta. As far as his current meta placement, I would say that he is looking to be between top 15 and top 10. He is probably not breaking the top 10 border right now, but he is probably in that top 15 range. He's about the same performance-wise as Ultra UI Goku. Ultra UI Goku does have a slight edge because of all the recent additions that he has to his kit, but they're very, I would say, very interchangeable, and you're not going to do massively better or worse choosing to run one or the other. With that being said, this is your boy Aizen, signing out.